in the midst of an attack here, the Numidians got swept forward, swept towards by the Roman cav. Now, let me just step back for a moment. I'll go back to that in a second. But the Roman army has failed in its momentum. The winds stopped, which were kind of oppressing their forward motion somewhat. But the problem is, I had all the low-valued leaders strung out towards the back in the hopes of getting a second a momentum to move another line forward or whatever. So I ended up losing the advantage that I had set up with having all my leaders in correct order. So now they're facing a situation where they can't really move forward with the whole bulk the way they had been trying to. My error there. Of course, on the other hand, Hannibal chose not to use his elite leader ability, which would have allowed him to, he probably would have used it to fire off some of his slingers, and that would have, could have fired both lines, and that would have maybe softened up the Velites a little bit, but it just didn't look worth it compared to seeing what happens here. The one thing that might have been worth it was rearranging his whole line, especially here where we see one of the calves struck in there. So what happened here is the Prefect Equite managed to get a 0 or 1, which is what he needed to activate his line, and this was all one formed line. He started sending some cav down, and the Numidians fell away from him. I was debating whether or not they should stand, but they fell away. But they ended up getting so cluttered just by bad movement or whatever choices that a flank attack became possible. So the rest of the line held, which they kind of had to choose to do at some point or another in order to protect the flank of the phalanx there, which really doesn't want to get hit. Of course, one of them did anyway. The battle isn't underway yet, but I have fired off the missiles, and I've done the tactical quality checks, and now it's time to roll off each individual battle. Okay, let's try this again. I forgot to push record, it seems. So this is the ending situation that we had, and this is on 3 momentum attacks. Basically, the Roman cav struck forward. It hit the Numidian cav. That stuff's like a brick wall with its high tactical quality. But the thing is, the Romans were able to attack with tactical quality advantage, with tactical superiority, because they're attacking. If they're defending, neither side has it, which is why the Numidians really should have hit first. They had the option last turn. They could have barely reached. They could have thrown their javelins, and they could have struck. And it would have been better overall for them. What they're facing now isn't that pleasant. The only advantage they have is this line has a little opening, and they're going to run through and wreak havoc on some of those cav. We also have the problem of this poor phalanx, and it took enough that it had to make a check, and then it ended up getting a little better. One of the things with the system, if you're in the zone of control right after combat and you're 1 short of breaking, you make a roll, and you either break or you get better by 1. And in this case, it got better. We also have one of the Numidians at 6. One of the Romans almost broke in the same way, but he also survived. I don't have a lot more leaders left of these low-valued ones, and they're not really capable of doing anything until I move them forward. I'm going to make some sort of attack with Vera, or yeah, Paulus is way back there. Damn it. Yeah, I definitely don't plan well with my leaders, it seems. Okay, and that's really about it. Well, the Romans finally got a leader who managed to get a continuation after moving up to take command of the Velites. He sent the Velites forward, smashed the slingers back. A lot of the Velites ended up hitting the front line. Then he got another continuation, and instead of sending a second wave of Velites in, which to me is just a waste, they can't really budge the main line too well, And in fact, they're kind of breaking up my attack by being there. But then again, that's better than the slingers breaking it up, right? A whole set, the Hastari and of course some of the Alia were sent in, and you can see it's kind of sporadic. It's not a solid line hit, partially because of the line that Hannibal built, but also partially because there's so much in the way as they came forward. Anyway, we haven't actually done anything other than some missile fire. A couple of units broke from... No, nothing broke from that. And now the actual engagement starts. Basically, all the things with no missiles on them have already engaged. They're not what's hitting. What's hitting is these orange, green guys up here. A couple of legions. And at the end of all of that, this is just the launching of the Velites and then the Hastati. We got a mess, a lot of no missile signs, huh? Well, let me try to decipher what we can see here. There's very little in the center here. There's one formed unit. Everything else is pretty much routed here. So the Roman line definitely broke the middle very nicely. Over here it's a little less clear. There was some pushback, there's no question. We got some Celts that got pushed away. But for the most part, things kind of stuck there. And likewise over here, we got some breakthrough. This is Roman units here, but these... No, this is Carthage. These are Roman. So largely here it's broken too, although there are a couple of... Carthaginian units there. But for the most part, that infantry line, it's gone. It just dissolved. I mean, we got one wing over here that's good, and one wing over here that's good. The guys who didn't fight. We also see one of the phalanxes. Boom. That was a risky move going out, trying to do the outflank, and it didn't pay off, and it looks really bad for Carthage at this point. Yeah, they've got their cav here, which could do a lot of damage to the Roman line. But we've seen that the Roman infantry is able to sustain a cav-only attack at times. They end up catching the cav in their zones, perhaps, and being able to defeat it at high cost. We've also got some cav left for the Romans, and some back here rallying. Those guys are pursuing back there. They left the battlefield chasing other cav. Over here, the cav versus cav battle is not decided. I mean, not much time is here. This is one thing I wanted to bring up because of the request that may have been about great battles of history. This would be a really, really hard game to do a demo of. At least in-game. I may set up a very small scenario if there's any interest in that and if people chime in about it. Not a real one, and play a couple of activations or something with a tripod probably, just to show how much effort there is. But this thing, it took me an hour and a half to do one activation there. It's the big actions in this game, and those are the interesting ones, right? I mean, that's where the battles are happening. Can be really, really time-consuming and expensive, and I don't have that much video. Carthage attempted to throw some Celts in, I don't know, Bleak, and they actually did pretty well, it looked like, but then a couple of heavies, good old Varro launched a line, and he just scattered it all over the place. But some of it came charging this way, knocked another phalanx running, a couple of the Celts, broke up that line. That threat's a lot weaker now. Yeah, it's one of the more exciting things Varro managed to do. He charged his own cav. Now that's all the rest of the cav he has on this side beyond what's rallying back there. and smacked into the rear, knocked one unit into the dead pile, and sent a couple others running in the wrong direction. He's trying to get something of a line of infantry to protect against whatever the cav might do. If he can stretch that all the way to the water, that would be very, very potent, because we're pretty sure that the cav cannot face the infantry head on. And the phalanxes aren't that hot for it. In fact, if I had the option to set up the Romans as I liked, I would have anchored my infantry here. In fact, I might have anchored my infantry across the board and just said to hell with it. My cav can't stand up to the Carthaginian cav. But instead, Varro's set up with cav on both flanks. And that definitely weakens the position, because this wedge that is just driving down, it's unstoppable. But there's a lot of it that's not being used and that wouldn't have to be used, and that it could stretch out across the entire board, and that would allow more velites. That would allow the troops that are back in camp to operate. Well, we're going over to Hasdrubal, and we'll see what he can do about this situation. He wants to get those cav to threaten this movement. If he can break that extension, it would be pretty helpful, because then it exposes that whole flank on the Roman right. So Hasdrubal fired off some cav and hit some of that Roman cav that's out here, hit the end of the line, but he didn't get a lot of activity in there. Over here with Maharabal, he's kind of tossing it up with those Romans that engaged him. Wasn't in the best position, swung around, ended up cutting some off. These are Roman units that are routing in the wrong direction, basically. And kind of cut around and smashed the sides here. And got a lot of victories there, but unfortunately what we're seeing is he also pursued a lot of Romans off the map, which is always a painful trade-off. In a way, you'd rather not kill the unit and let your enemy try to rally them, and especially with these Roman leaders that aren't terribly good, and things like this that are, where are they going to go? But it's beginning to look like it may be a possibility to send somebody out and try to reform some of that cav that went pursuing the Romans. But that's an expensive thing for Carthage to do with its low number of leaders. However, they look like they're actually outnumbered over here on the Roman front. Well, if you count all the routed ones. Alright. So I got one thing left to do, and that's figure out, I got 3 actions perhaps with Hannibal, and I think I want to rally a lot of units. And that's pretty much the end of the turn. I calculated out the points. It's for both turns actually. Carthage has lost 24, Rome's lost 41. I don't remember what we need to aim for. I know the Romans need like 240 or something. Carthage needs 175. So Hannibal was able, because he's Hannibal, to rally almost everything back here, which is pretty potent. He's still got some key pieces back here, though, that he's got a problem watching leave. Another one of the phalanxes. He's down to only 1 up on this side. He's gotten really, really hit hard by the Roman shift here. Over here it hasn't happened. He didn't want those phalanxes that far up, though. Historically, he managed to pull them back, but I allowed Varro to attack a little earlier than he historically did. got some routing. It was kind of funny because the Romans routed from here and Carthaginians routed from here, kind of passing each other. Hey, Romans running through those nice channels built to route through. But, you know, the center, the Carthaginian center is still chaos. I mean, unrouting all those units, that's great and everything, but there's not a lot there to stop the Romans. What can the Romans do, though? They still have to slam into those units, and that's kind of the problem. If those units weren't there, they could just sort of wheel and take out the flanks very easily. But with that scattering of garbage, even those Balearic slingers, it requires a little bit of effort. It requires you to go up and contact them and stop and watch them run away, and then you've been halted a bit and slowed down. And that's really what Hannibal's got to hope for here, is that things can slow down enough here in the center where he doesn't have much of value, so that he can maybe finish this Cav battle off, go rescue some Cav from back here, and start doing some heavy flanking from that side. And over here, that he's going to be able to get his Cav around and start smashing the Roman right flank, because there's really nothing to defend that right now. There's a couple Cav back here, but they're not going to be able to do much. There's a powerful, powerful force here under Hasdrubal. If he could just launch it where he wants it, which is here. The Romans, on the other hand, are trying to build up a defensive wall in both cases. Here they've done probably less of a good job, but they're facing less here. They've kind of scattered the infantry there. So the reason why this one maybe works better is it hasn't been tested yet. It also hasn't been able to pick off those phalanxes. Alright, I'm going to load this one up and see what happens.